Obviously, we're speaking with authorities there just about this announcement that the Western Australian government will now be introducing mental health checks for anyone getting or wanting to have a firearms licence in that state. And it's certainly come after a spate of incidents. 20 people died from gunshot wounds in Western Australia last year. And the Police Minister, Paul Papalia, there said that mental health issues were involved in at least half of those deaths. We'll keep monitoring that news conference, bring you more as that happens. But joining me now live here in the Melbourne studio is the Shadow Victorian Police Minister, Brad Battin. Brad, thank you very much for your time this afternoon.
Thank you, Simon.
So, Brad, you're a former police officer and you'd obviously be aware of these growing calls for a national firearms register, given many incidents around the country. And we're just hearing from WA, clearly they're trying to, put more checks in place. Do you think potentially mental health checks might be something that Victoria should have a look at too?
I think it's something, and not knowing all the details of it over there at the moment, because obviously a lot of people that die by firearm are self-inflicted. So you would say there's a mental health issue there. Then the concern is how many of those are licensed firearms? What would the impact of that change be? So without getting all of the details, I think it's a very difficult thing. And the other thing you have to look at too is who would it pick up? Would it pick up those people that have committed some of our bigger shootings in Australia? Would they have been picked up in that system, or would they have not been picked up in the recent one in Queensland? I think there was a highlight, and I'm going off memory here, one of them had a mental health issue, I'm pretty confident was in the education system.
Yes.
And I think that kind of thing, maybe then there should be a review, but I'm not sure if that was also the person that had the licence for the firearm, so I don't want to speak directly on any cases, but anything to keep the community safe should be reviewed, but also understanding shooting is still a sport. People still have the opportunity to use firearms, and it's a way to have community engagement with those people. So I think we've got to also protect that at the same time.
Do you think, with your former police officer's hat on, do you think a national register will be easy to update around the country and would be useful to police around the country?
In conversations with police, they have said there could be some definite benefits out of having a national firearm registry. Yeah. We're still at very early stages on our discussions with it, but I'll meet up with the association again in Victoria. My focus, obviously, as a Victorian MP, is to what's going to happen and how's it going to impact in Victoria. As far as gun laws, we've got some of the toughest laws in the world. We already know that. That came in with John Howard, which everybody knows the whole story around why and how he did that. But you can always look at ways of improving. And the Victoria Police, they are the first to say the challenge with firearm registry is how do we get the illegal guns off the street? The legal ones, as a rule, aren't the ones used in a lot of these major crimes or in crime sprees. It's the illegal ones. So they would probably prefer sometimes more funding in that as well. Well,
let's just shift gears now and just talk about youth justice here in Victoria, which is a big issue and one that you're obviously very much focused on in your new role in the Victorian Shadow Cabinet. You've written an op-ed in the Herald Sun and Sunday Herald Sun today talking about the youth justice system and particularly highlighting that the Cherry Creek new facility that's been built on the way down to Geelong for youth justice detainees doesn't have a single person in it yet. I guess, what's your concerns over that? Because the government's certainly been saying that they're trying to prepare this for detainees.
Yeah, I know the argument from the government is they're trying to get staff in it and they're having trouble getting staff. At the same time, they're saying it's not operational as yet. Now, it should have been or could have been operational last year. So there's two sides of it. One of them, why didn't they advertise for staff coming into an election? Because it highlights a youth justice issue. So you can imagine advertising from the government was on big build rather than around getting in staff for the new facility there. But the other side of this is a strategy. You know your 5-year strategy. If Sky News want to expand, you know what your strategy is. The Victorian government knew they wanted to expand, so why didn't they, like in a school, put a principal in 12 months ago to start the program for planning of how do we get the staff involved? So they haven't got their senior leadership team in yet. This is what's going to create all these delays. So there's no set date for when this will open.
Ideally, though, you wouldn't want any children to be in a facility such as this. So your role has also been looking at preventing young people getting caught up in the system, preventing them committing crimes as well. One of the big debates that the Victorian Parliament will probably have as it returns this week is around some of the bail issues, but also raising the age of criminal responsibility. And while your colleagues broadly seem to not be in favour of raising the age, you sort of take a stance that the age should possibly be raised. Is that right?
On the bail issues, I know there should be some reforms, and we're happy to work through that with the government, that are positive reforms without worrying about the violent offenders. My view has always been around raising the age. Violent offenders, we must always have a circumstance and a way that we can protect the community from them. So the people we're scared of, we're afraid of, they should be locked up. There should be in a way that we can take them away and re-educate them. My fundamental belief, though, is anyone under 18, I would love to never have in jail because it means we've got no crime. But our target should be on every person who's a non-violent offender, what can the government do and authorities do to keep them out of the system? How can we put them in place with programs to get them job ready? All of these amazing things we can do with them that are programs available. At the moment, we're spending $5,000 a day to keep a young person in the justice system. $5,000 a day. Do you know there's no AFL player that earns that much in this country? And I could send 40 students to a private school every year for the same money. So why is it the government can find the money for $5,000 a day to keep them in, but we can't find money to run programs to keep them out? Around the world they do it. There's so much evidence, academic evidence and real evidence that shows that we can make these changes, but instead we're building bigger prisons with bigger walls, whereas we should have been looking at smaller prisons that have got rehabilitative modules that are all about getting someone job ready or re-entering the education system.
And how are you feeling ahead of Parliament back for another year? Obviously, you know, you were unsuccessful at the election as a party. How does the coalition, I guess, go about rebuilding this year?
Look, it's like every step, you've got to take it one step at a time. But I think I'm pretty confident at the moment. We've had our little conference. We go down and sit down, have a chat.
Loving.
I know some refer to it loving. I hate the word loving. It's actually a conference. We do generally come out with some good options. At the same time, it's about team building again. You've got to get back on the same page. The first part of that puzzle was obviously myself and John had a challenge for the leadership, but we are speaking probably every 3 or 4 days. I was out representing him last night. I have all the respect in the world for John. He's given me now the trust to come into criminal justice reform, which will be a very big project over the next 4 years. I actually think as a team we can get back together, go back out and start to genuinely listen to the community, and it's the growth corridors. And I say this to my team in town. The Liberal Party, whilst our focus has been in a town, in the city, we have to start looking at the growth corridors. That's where the majority of people are. That's the people that are impacted by the most change from government.
Brad Battin, really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Simon.